Every night, more than 20,000 people in Ohio face the uncertainty of not knowing where they'll sleep, a number that's been steadily rising. A packed stadium filled with people who have nowhere to call home. That's the reality in Ohio tonight. In cities like Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, Dayton, and Akron, homelessness is no longer confined to the shadows. Cleveland alone sees more than 3,000 people without homes on any given night. In Columbus, the homeless population has jumped more than 20% in just a few years. Some find beds in shelters, but many more sleep in cars, under bridges, or in hidden encampments along highways. Others, what advocates call the hidden homeless, are scattered across rural Ohio. They sleep in old cars behind gas stations, rotate between friends' couches, or huddle in abandoned buildings unfit for living. In southern counties like Scioto and Pike, communities that once thrived on coal or manufacturing are now struggling with record levels of housing insecurity. Here there may be no visible tent cities, but the pain is just as real. Homelessness in Ohio doesn't always look like what you see in the movies. Sometimes it looks like a waitress serving your breakfast or a child in your grandchild's classroom. These are people holding down jobs, waiters, delivery drivers, day laborers, yet unable to afford a place to sleep at night. What makes Ohio's crisis especially hard to solve is that in small towns and rural areas, the homeless are nearly invisible. The services available in cities, shelters, food banks, basic healthcare, often don't exist here. Transportation is limited, the stigma is worse. And in a place where everyone knows everyone, being homeless is something people feel they must hide. No one wakes up and decides to be homeless. For most Ohioans, homelessness is the last step in a long slide, caused by economic shifts, unaffordable housing, bad luck, and a threadbare safety net. Back in the 1980s, Ohio's factories and mills provided stable work for thousands. Youngstown made steel, Lordstown built cars, Akron produced rubber. Wages weren't high, but a family could get by. Over time, globalization, automation, and deregulation sent those jobs away. Entire towns lost their main source of income almost overnight. Families who once owned their homes watched them fall into disrepair as paychecks dried up. Cities became dotted with empty factories and abandoned homes. The average Ohio renter needs to earn $17.70 per hour to afford a basic one-bedroom apartment at fair market rent, but most make only about $14 per hour. Rents have climbed steadily, but wages haven't kept up. Even a minor setback, a job loss, car breakdown, or medical bill can send a family spiraling toward eviction. According to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, the average rent has jumped 10% in just 3 years. Meanwhile, incomes have barely budged. Financial vulnerability is everywhere. The American Psychological Association found that 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing or selling something. For low-wage workers in Ohio, that means one misfortune can quickly lead to homelessness. And when people lose their homes, it's often for good. Another factor is mental health. Ohio faces a shortage of affordable mental health services. Many who end up homeless suffer from untreated depression, trauma, or other mental illnesses. Without help, it's almost impossible for them to regain stability. Stigma and limited access make the situation worse, especially in rural areas where resources are few and far between. Think Ohio can turn this around? Type yes if you believe it's fixable, no if it'll take more than a miracle. We all picture homeless encampments in city downtowns. And yes, the largest numbers are in cities like Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. Here you'll find shelters, soup kitchens, and at least some support, though it's never enough. But the rural crisis is different, and arguably even more devastating. In the valleys of Appalachia, in places like Hocking County or the farming suburbs of Jackson, homelessness is hidden from view. There are no tents or cardboard signs. Instead, you find families living out of cars, or a father and child quietly sleeping in the back of a pickup every night. Shelters might be 30 miles away, with no public transit. Neighbors may not even know who's struggling, until it's too late. One man from Vinton County shared his story. After the repair shop he worked at closed, he lived in his car for 8 months. If people here find out you're sleeping in your car, they think you're lazy or addicted. But I work every day, just not enough to pay for a home. Whether in a big city or a rural county, the pain is the same. The difference is only in how visible the suffering is and how hard it is to get help. Before we dive into the consequences of homelessness, don't forget to support us by liking the video, subscribing to our channel, and turning on notifications. Thank you, best of followers. For the individual, homelessness is more than the absence of shelter. It's a daily struggle for survival, safety, and dignity. Homeless Ohioans face much higher rates of chronic illness, like infections, hepatitis, and tuberculosis, because of poor sanitation and little access to care. Nearly 40% report being victims of violence. For every week someone spends on the streets, the odds of finding stable work or housing get worse. The longer a person is homeless, the harder it becomes to break free from that cycle. Many lose their sense of hope, dignity, and even their sense of self. But the impact doesn't stop at the individual. The entire communities feel the strain. Local hospitals absorb the cost when people without homes turn up in emergency rooms. Schools struggle when children lack the stability of a home, falling behind in class or dropping out entirely. Crime rates can rise as desperation sets in. And all of this puts new pressure on already stretched city and county budgets. The problem isn't just a shortage of affordable homes. Even where low-income apartments exist, they're often in poor condition, unsafe, crowded, or in neighborhoods cut off from jobs, schools, and services. Some parts of Cleveland have vacancy rates over 20%, but what's left isn't safe or healthy for families. Ohio's social welfare system was not built to handle a crisis of this scale. Housing vouchers and rental assistance programs run out of funds long before everyone in need is helped. Over 60% of people seeking housing assistance are turned away, forced to survive however they can. Waiting lists for aid can stretch over a year, especially in the bigger cities. Mental health care is just as hard to find. Fewer than half of Ohio's homeless population receives any treatment. Without support, people with mental illness or addiction find themselves trapped, sometimes for years. Even as advocates and volunteers fight to fill the gaps, the system is buckling under the weight. When a crisis seems too big for any one person to solve, it's easy to look away. But in Ohio, countless individuals make the choice every day to face this tragedy head-on. These are the social workers, volunteers, shelter staff, and formerly homeless people who refuse to let their neighbors disappear into the shadows. Consider Linda, a social worker in Columbus. For 12 years, Linda has greeted new arrivals at her emergency shelter, parents with children, veterans, people recently discharged from hospitals or released from jail. Her job isn't only about finding beds or handing out meals. Most of the time, it's about listening. So many people just want someone to hear their story, Linda explains. When you're homeless, people look right through you. Marcus's story is different, but no less powerful. After years surviving on the streets of Dayton, sleeping on benches, eating from dumpsters, braving freezing winters, he was able to turn his life around with the help of a tiny homes community. Now Marcus volunteers to help others find their way out. If I could do it, so can they, he says. But everyone needs someone to believe in them before they can start believing in themselves. In Toledo, Dr. Sarah runs a mobile health clinic for the homeless. Each week, she parks her van in neighborhoods where she knows people are living rough. With little more than bandages, medicine, and a listening ear, she tries to patch wounds the system ignores. It's exhausting, but if we don't show up, nobody else will, Sarah says. I'm not a savior. I'm just trying to make sure these folks are seen. These helpers aren't immune to burnout. Most Ohio shelters are running on shoestring budgets, forced to choose every day who gets help and who must be turned away. Soup kitchens regularly run out of food. Mental health counselors have wait lists stretching months into the future. Still, the people on the front lines keep going. Not because it's easy, but because they know the cost if they don't. What makes their task even harder is the wall of public indifference. Volunteers are often ridiculed or threatened, accused of enabling laziness or wasting taxpayer dollars. But they keep showing up, standing between the most vulnerable and a system that often forgets them. Behind every tent on a city corner and every car parked overnight, in a quiet lot stands a more solid, invisible wall, the political wall. It's a wall built not from bricks but from policy failures, budget cuts, and, above all, neglect. Ohio's homelessness crisis is not simply the outcome of individual struggles. It's the result of years, decades, of public policy decisions that have consistently put other priorities ahead of those most in need. On paper, Nearly every politician claims to support strong families and safe neighborhoods. But in practice, vital programs for affordable housing, mental health, and addiction recovery have seen their budgets slashed or frozen even as the need has grown. In the last decade, billions have been spent on stadiums, highways, and commercial development across Ohio's major cities. While these investments have brought jobs and entertainment to some, they've rarely included meaningful commitments to low-income housing or community services. In fact, as rents have risen in redeveloped neighborhoods, thousands have found themselves pushed out and victims of so-called revitalization projects that remake a city's image but ignore its most vulnerable. The pattern repeats itself across Ohio. Local governments struggle with shrinking tax bases as factories close, leaving them unable to support existing social programs. Meanwhile, state and federal dollars are tied up in bureaucracy or never arrive at all. The waiting list for public housing in Columbus is now measured in years, not months. In Cleveland, the city's largest homeless shelter regularly operates over capacity. There simply are not enough beds. Sometimes new initiatives are proposed: rental vouchers, tiny home villages, wraparound services for mental health and addiction. But these efforts are too often temporary, underfunded, or blocked by local zoning laws and political resistance. NIMBYism, not in my backyard, is as strong in Ohio as anywhere, with residents protesting against new shelters or affordable housing projects, citing concerns about property values or neighborhood safety. This wall is reinforced by the stories we tell ourselves. Many believe homelessness is a problem caused by bad decisions or lack of ambition. This myth, perpetuated by some politicians, has been used to justify neglecting the very policies that could end homelessness for thousands. The reality is far more complicated. Public debate rarely centers on the question of how to guarantee housing for everyone. Instead, the conversation gets sidetracked by talk of welfare fraud or personal responsibility, even as shelters fill and encampments spread. As long as the political conversation fails to focus on root causes and proven solutions, Ohio's homeless crisis will continue to grow in the shadows. But there is hope. Across Ohio, grassroots organizations, faith communities, and dedicated advocates are pushing for real change. In Cincinnati, coalitions of churches have come together to purchase land and build supportive housing for the chronically homeless. In Columbus, a few city council members have fought to increase funding for mental health outreach teams. But even these bright spots remain limited by the larger wall of inertia and underfunding. The truth is, the solution to homelessness in Ohio is not a mystery. It's a question of will, coordination, and investment. First, the state must treat homelessness as an emergency, not an afterthought. This means creating a statewide task force with the power and funding to coordinate across agencies, break down bureaucratic barriers, and launch a rapid response to the most urgent needs. Other states have piloted emergency measures, such as hotel and motel voucher programs during the pandemic, that provided immediate shelter and reduced exposure to the elements and disease. Ohio can learn from these successes and adapt them for the long haul. Second, increase affordable housing by every means possible. The state needs to incentivize and directly invest in new construction of affordable units, rehabilitation of vacant buildings, and preservation of existing low-income housing. Tax credits for developers, public-private partnerships, and creative land trusts can all play a role. Land banks like the Cuyahoga Land Bank in Cleveland have begun to turn abandoned properties into affordable homes, but this work must be dramatically scaled up. Advocates estimate that over 150,000 additional affordable units are needed just to meet current demand. Third, expand and integrate support services. Many people experiencing homelessness need more than just a roof. Wraparound services, like mental health counseling, substance use treatment, case management, and job training, must be embedded into housing programs. The Housing First model, already proven successful in cities like Salt Lake City and Houston, prioritizes getting people housed first, then connecting them to the resources they need to stay housed. Studies have shown this approach saves money in the long run by reducing emergency room visits, jail stays, and shelter use. Fourth, protect tenants and prevent homelessness before it starts. Stronger tenant protections, eviction prevention programs, and emergency rental assistance can keep families from being pushed onto the streets in the first place. Legal aid programs that support tenants facing eviction have been shown to dramatically reduce the number of people who lose their homes, especially when combined with flexible financial assistance. Fifth, listen to the voices of those most affected. People who have experienced homelessness themselves have a deep understanding of what works and what doesn't. They should be included at every level of planning, policy, and implementation. Cities like Dayton have started employing peer navigators, formerly homeless individuals who now help others access services and regain stability. Their lived experience is an invaluable resource. Consider Emily, a single mother from Akron who lost her apartment after missing just one rent payment. With nowhere to go, she and her 2 children bounced between friends' couches, sometimes sleeping in her car. Emily says the only reason she's now in stable housing is because she got a spot in a rapid rehousing program. They didn't just give me a place. They helped me find daycare for my kids, get mental health counseling, and get a job with steady hours. It wasn't charity, it was a lifeline. Lastly, the public must change its mindset. We must see homelessness as a shared challenge, not someone else's problem. That means confronting stigma, speaking up against stereotypes, and demanding that local, state, and national leaders make housing a human right. Ohio has the resources, expertise, and talent to end homelessness. What's needed now is the public and political will to turn proven solutions into reality. At this point, you may be thinking, these problems are too big for me to solve. The truth is, while no single person can end homelessness alone, small actions, taken together, can create a wave of change. Start by becoming informed and spreading awareness. Let's talk about the reality of homelessness in Ohio with friends, family, and colleagues. Share stories and facts, not just the sensational headlines, but the human stories behind the numbers. This can help break down stigma and misinformation that makes solutions harder to achieve. Support local organizations and initiatives. Even modest donations can have an outsized impact. Whether it's a homeless shelter, a food pantry, a mobile health clinic, or a mental health outreach team, these groups are on the front lines every day. Volunteering time is just as valuable. Many organizations need help with serving meals, sorting donations, or providing mentorship and companionship. Advocate for policy change. Contact your local and state representatives. Let them know you expect them to fund affordable housing, support eviction prevention, and expand access to mental health care. Attend town hall meetings. Write letters to the editor. Show up at community forums. Policy change is slow, but sustained advocacy from ordinary citizens is one of the few things that has ever moved it forward. Help someone directly. If you feel comfortable, reach out to people experiencing homelessness in your community. Sometimes the smallest gestures, offering a meal, listening to someone's story, pointing them toward local resources, can make all the difference. Be a voice for compassion. When you hear others dismiss homelessness as a choice or a failure, speak up. Challenge the stereotypes. Remind people that homelessness is a crisis with complex causes, and that, most importantly, it can happen to anyone. As one Ohio shelter director put it, nobody wakes up one day and decides they want to live on the street. It's 1,000 tiny things, and if you haven't experienced it, you're lucky, not better. Every community in Ohio has people who care. If enough of us raise our voices and lend our hands, the political wall can begin to crack. Ohio is sometimes called the bellwether of America, a state that reflects the nation's triumphs and troubles. When it comes to homelessness, Ohio holds up a mirror to the entire country. Look closely, and you see a society at a crossroads. One path leads toward greater division, with more people falling through widening cracks, more tents on city sidewalks, more kids sleeping in cars. The other path requires empathy, courage, and a willingness to demand better from ourselves and our leaders. Homelessness is not just an Ohio problem. It is a national wound. Every person without a safe place to sleep tonight is a reminder of the promises our country has made and failed to keep. The values of hard work, family, and community are not just for those with steady paychecks and mortgages. They belong to all of us. Ohio's crisis offers lessons for every state. It shows how economic change, weak social safety nets, and housing shortages can combine to push even the most resilient people to the brink. But it also shows that change is possible. That with enough determination, coordinated action, and above all compassion, the tide can turn. Perhaps one video won't solve homelessness. But if this story moves you to see your neighbors differently, to act, to vote, to help, then it is a step forward. Change starts with awareness, then conversation, then action. Ohio's future, and America's, will be measured not just by economic growth or shiny new stadiums, but by whether we find the courage to care for those left behind. As you finish this video, consider what kind of state, what kind of nation do you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? This crisis is not insurmountable. It's not hopeless. We just haven't truly tried. Maybe the answer to America's future is not in the skyscrapers of Washington, but hidden among the quiet streets of Ohio, a place that still remembers that the most human thing we can do is to leave no one behind. We've explored the hidden realities of homelessness across Ohio, the faces behind the statistics, the roots of the crisis, and the hope offered by everyday heroes. The solutions are complex but possible if we come together, demand real action, and refuse to let anyone fall through the cracks. What do you believe is the biggest barrier to solving homelessness in Ohio? Let's start a conversation in the comments. I read everyone. And don't forget to hit subscribe, turn on notifications bell so we can see you again in our next video. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Your support truly means the world. Wishing you the best of luck. Thanks for being with us on this great journey. Leave your thoughts in the comments and like to help us. Remember to subscribe for more. See you soon.